Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you were kicking it with GFAMunited, a spot that's all about inspiring you to be salt and light. So without further ado, let's make it do what it do. Hit it. Hey, yo, my God will take a nobody that nobody knows. No matter the clothes, past sins don't matter no more. See, all that matters is the heart and the condition to sin. Hand your life over to Christ and leave the rest up to Him. We call that salvation, no need for decoration. Come as you are, embrace the Lord, then it's celebration. A new life, a new plan, and a new direction. How beautiful are the feet of those that bring His message. Yo, what's up, fam? Welcome back to season 2. Today I got my boy Omar Pagan,
Yes,
a.k.a.
sir.
Gucci Man's in the building.
You did, yes. Here
Welcome
I
to the
am.
pod, man.
Thank you.
Folks probably wondering why we call you Gucci Man, because he stays Gucci down to the socks, yo.
I intentionally didn't wear Gucci today, so.
I did not know you had things that were not Gucci, man.
I have Gucci shoes on. Never mind.
There it is. Let's go. Yo, so today we're going to be talking about specifically identity, and this season is all about faith. So faith has always been something to me that I think I've always gravitated towards. There was something about watching men and women of faith and how that transformed their lives, seeing them do things that we knew were like humanly impossible, and then just seeing how close they were to God when they chose to walk in faith. So I've always been just drawn to this idea of faith. You know, the Bible talks about faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. And I agree wholeheartedly. Close second for me is faith. Like, for me, something about faith just draws me. Like, I want to be known for the way I lived out my faith.
Yeah.
So we're talking about how faith becomes that pathway to discovering what our identity is in Christ. So for those of them that don't know Omar, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. First, love the topic. I think identity and faith just go perfectly together, and I think that's just it'll make for a great conversation today. So yes, I'm Omar, and for those who don't know, if he mentioned Gucci, it's because I work there. I'm not bougie or anything. It's just simply that I work there, and I get free clothes. All right.
Let's go.
Nonetheless, Omar, I was born in Cleveland. I was there till I was 12. I was born into a pastoral family, so been in the faith most of my life, pretty much all my life. And from there, we decided to go to your side of town. I went to Florida, but more in the central area, like Kissimmee, Orlando area. So I did most of my growing up there, and eventually that's where I was there. I got married there, had children there, and then I ended up in Philadelphia for a little bit. And now I'm in Charlotte. So here we are.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Yo, you ever notice, and this wasn't a setup, because I definitely wanted people to just hear a little bit about you. You ever notice when you're asked that question? So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we go towards what we do and what we accomplished in life, that those are the attributes of me sharing with you who I am. We instantly go through those kind of things. And as Christians, we're both being believers, our makeup, like our DNA, the very thing that sets us apart for His glory is that we're His children.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a son of God. I'm a child of God. I'm a Christian. Like, that is that defining trait to me. I wonder why we don't lead with that when someone says, man, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Like, why don't we lead with that as one of the first things? Because we know, for conversation's sake, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we usually go into, well, you know, I do this, I work here, I've done this, I've also accomplished this, I'm a husband, and so forth.
Yeah.
And then maybe we'll slip in at the end, I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
Like, why don't you think we don't lead with that?
You know, that's a great question, because I do think about that sometimes, even kind of like leading up to today, where I have even fallen into that category, or not even that category, just a part of my life that a lot of what I identify with and find a lot of value from is outside of my stance in Christ, right?
Yeah.
So my stance in Christ, I am a child of God. I was chosen before the foundations of the earth for a purpose.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I know that's there, but I know in my day-to-day, if I really want to know what defines my identity, it's not necessarily what I want it to be. It's I got to look back and what I've valued for the last month, year, and a lot of times I'm finding more value in my job, or as a husband, as a father, not really, making that priority that I am a child of God, and outside of that, I should not find any more value,
Yeah.
or identity.
Yeah. Well, I think about like when we allow the things we do, when we allow our accomplishments and achievements, when we allow those things to define us, like our identity really is not secure at all. It's so risky. It's so much of a gamble because what I do can change tomorrow in a drop of a hat. I could lose my job. And if I lose my job, that thing that was a huge part of my life that became my makeup, what happens then? I feel lost.
Yeah.
If, God forbid, my family was in a wreck and I lost them. If so much of who I am is strictly just found in the things that can just be taken away, it really is a huge chance and a risk that I'm taking rather than finding my foundation for my identity in something that will never falter and something that will never change. Like my stance, no one can take that away from me, that I'm a Christian, that I'm a child of God. And that influences the life that I choose to live, every decision that I make, every opportunity I accept, every door that I close. It's all filtered through who I am. So I think, man, it's such a risk on our part.
It is. And, I think it's dumb for me to find any sort of identity in anything outside of who created me. So I know the only one that could label me and who I am is the person who created me for a purpose. So I think there are a lot of distractions in the sense that we do identify with ourselves with what we do, what people think about us, with what we've accomplished. Those are very easy to identify, even within a church setting and a ministry setting. I think it's easy to do that, but like you said, that stuff, and I've witnessed it, where my entire life everything is perfect, and everything's going well, and suddenly when sickness hit or death hit, or my son, was born with some difficulties, when that happened, I had nothing to stand on. You know what I'm saying? So I think I can't find my identity, or at least put a foundation under something that never even created me.
Like we both went to Southeastern. We both been involved in ministry, and I went through a season where I was pretty active in ministry. Once I left college, got a youth pastor position, served there for a couple of years, resigned from that position, and I went through a period where, like, ministry is all around us. Like, we know that. But there is something about when you have a full-time ministry position, for whatever reason, it makes you feel more qualified. It legitimizes the ministry, because you can say, well, I'm a youth pastor, I'm a senior pastor, I'm an associate pastor, and these are my roles. And I remember, because I've been there for a long time, a big part of my identity just felt like it was missing, because I went to seminary, I got my degree, I'm a licensed minister, been a licensed minister for probably about 20 years, give or take. But when you're not in a clear role where you're in a ministry context per se, you do feel like, we all got a ministry, but you don't take the same confidence and posture that you would if there was a clear title for you. So even that, if we're not careful, we allow something like the work of the ministry to become our identity. And then, God forbid, something happens where they let you go. Even in something you were doing for the kingdom, now you feel like you lost your identity. You felt like that was a safe, secure place because I'm doing this as unto the Lord.
Yeah.
Now that's taken away.
Yeah.
And I don't know, my ministry doesn't feel as legit because no one's calling me Pastor so-and-so now.
Right.
You know, so how do you feel like that? Because you youth ministry.
Yeah.
Now you're a manager at Gucci. Does it feel different for you at times?
You know what? It does, and I'll kind of say it in a way that in two scenarios: my life and then the life I've witnessed my dad live, my father. You know, like I said, I grew up in a pastoral household. My dad was a pastor. We moved to Florida. He was still in pastorship, eldership, like really involved in ministry, but he didn't have a pulpit in front of him all the time, right? So what I noticed and what I've witnessed with my dad is that he pivoted over from pulpit ministry, where he used his lunch table at work, he used the couch at home, he used a car on the way home. That became his pulpit. He pivoted really well. So where myself, and I think it's a little bit different in the sense that I was in ministry. I studied at Southeastern. I became a youth pastor. I was youth pastoring for a really long time. But what I found myself doing, because the identity of being a pastor passed, and I started really embarking myself in my career, all that energy that I would put towards ministry, I think I pivoted over to something else. So where I would be working ministry, I put all that work into being a good manager or a good leader or a better worker, not realizing that the deeper I went into that, the less weight or urgency I had to do ministry in that time of my life. You know, so it's almost like the enemy was using that to bait me away from what God really called me to do and the purpose he had for me in ministry. So I think that that's where I kind of fell within that aspect of ministry.
So how do you feel you're at? Where do you feel you're at right now? Like when it comes to that same train of thought, you've been in there for a good while. Like, is it something that you've better grasped and you feel security in the sense of your ministry?
Yes, I think what fulfills that part is that I'm finding purpose in how God is using me within the context of work. I'm not doing it perfect. You know, I think I could really put my head down and go hard at work and not realize, like, wow, what am I here for? So, and then also being a father, you're in the same, you know, you've definitely a different stage, but I find a lot of purpose in that and explaining the gospel to my kids and that's not like a scapegoat either. I'm not trying to put it in that aspect, but I know I'm called to something, and I know I have something that God put inside of me that he uses for his purpose. And I think in my journey now being in Charlotte is just really finding where to use that, or the open doors that God wants me to use that in, you know? But I'm still in that journey though. Still in that journey.
I think in a lot of ways I'm still there too. I think it's just so important for us to be able to move with the Spirit and not be defined or held even in a box. And not to say a full-time pastoral position is putting you in a box, but when you're not there, you can see how limited you felt you were and how you could be of use to the kingdom. So again, for conversation's sake, what we're discussing is how, like last episode, we talked about what is faith, because I felt like it's so important for us to understand what faith is. Now we grew up on, now faith is the substance of things, hope for the evidence of things not seen. I hear that all the time, and I'm still clueless as to what you just said.
Right?
I'm like, huh? What's that?
And
I've looked through every translation, and none of them still really hit the same way. I don't remember what the message say, but I don't mess with the message like that no more.
Right.
So
faith is.
But what we broke down ultimately is that faith is ultimately trusting and believing. Trusting and believing in him. I trust him so much so that I'm committed to him. I believe him, therefore I'm able to now experience because I believe. Believing is something that is active. So I trust in him and in his characteristics and who he is, because I know he's trustworthy. And so when I walk by faith, I walk by faith and I walk in this trust in him. And where my confidence comes is because I know who he says he is, that he's faithful to his word. That's all the proof that I need.
And I would that's a good definition, and I believe it. That's exactly where I'm at. To go a little further, it's trusting him through his sovereignty.
Yeah.
I think that's what faith is to me, is trusting God, even in the point of salvation, that he now owns your life.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hard part sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
That sometimes we want faith and we utilize that faith as a tool, right? I have faith for a better outcome on something. I have faith so that sicknesses could be healed. And by all means, absolutely. You know, I think but faith is deeper in the sense that we're trusting God that although that sickness is still there, he's still the same perfect God, you know? And I think that's the hard part that I have had to learn.
Yeah.
Especially, like I said, growing up, what I thought everything was perfect, my faith kicked in when everything stopped being perfect. Because that's where I had to trust God through a lot of hard times, you know, and a lot of confusion.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's where our faith ultimately grows and flourishes. All the analogies we use, diamond, a plant, like the seed has to be pressed down in the soil, it has to die before it comes to life. A diamond, it's the coal, it's the pressure, that's when things come out. And it's the same thing with our faith. It's like we can all say we have faith until we go through hardship and struggle, and we're in the valley, and we don't hear the Lord's voice. Yeah. But I still choose to trust in his sovereignty, that he is God. And I think we understand that he saved us. We understand that to an extent, I think. I think if we literally knew we got saved from something, like our lives were about to be taken from us, he rescued us, I think we would have an even greater appreciation for him. Yeah. But I don't think we fully get that he's Lord. And he's Lord and Savior. Like, we don't, in the United States, we don't do the whole kings and queen and lordship. So I think it's a little bit harder for us to go to your point that we're his. He owns us. Yeah. And so we say that, but we give ourselves so much freedom to just walk by our own understanding, not realizing my life, I surrender to him, it's no longer mine, but his. Yeah. And when you have faith in him, it's not you just throwing your life away. It's you placing your life in the most secure hands possible.
Whether it's God or not, who is our true owner, like he created us, he owns us, we're sealed. If he's not owning us, something will. Yeah. And I think where in the scenarios we find ourselves is that we put ourselves in situations where work owns us, sin owns us, our temptations, you know, we're going through that series now, our temptations own us. So I think regardless we find our identity in who's owning us, you know? So even us studying Paul in the beginning of Romans chapter 1, you see how he's identifying as someone's property. I am now a servant of God. He has called me to be an apostle, you know? So he's now called to the gospel through God. So I think he's identifying himself by being property. Same with us. I think, you know, when we're struggling with sin, anything like that, our identity starts getting blurry because we're allowing something else to own us outside of our creator. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because we're so quick to be like, when it comes to religion per se, I'm not trying to be owned by anything, but the reality is something's going to own you.
We give it all up.
Yeah.
We give it all up.
In a heartbeat. And we deceive ourselves to think we in control and this is our doing, until you realize it has you in the grips and you can't sleep until you get this or get that or achieve this. That thing owns you.
Right.
So why not find your identity in someone who wants to free you and have your best interest in mind? Like, I made you and I know exactly what will bring you to life,
Yes.
what will bring you peace. I know exactly how you'll flourish if you just trust me. Like, man, and faith is what becomes that pathway to unlock that discovery of who we are in him.
Yeah, because faith is letting go.
Yeah.
Faith is completely letting go. And I think of Shadrach, Meshach, and
Meshach,
Abednego, right? That story, I love that story in the sense that all of their names, if you look, they were all attempted to be changed to names to fit the current setting in traditions that they were currently in, right?
Yeah.
So the king changed their name so they could change their owners. So I think in the same thing, the enemy uses our identity in the sense that if he can change who we see as our creator,
Yeah.
we're going to easily fall into the culture. We're going to easily fall into temptation. We're going to easily fall into these things that are outside of the purpose God has for us. I fell into that. I think for a while, because I wasn't living, no, I was in the faith, I was going to church, all of that. But I think I allowed all my energy and work, instead of using it for the purpose of God, I just started embarking myself so deeply into work, business, being busy, all that, that I look back and I'm like, okay, I'm finding value in what I have, what I do, and what people think about me, rather than, who my creator is for the purpose he made me for, you know?
Even going back to that story, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, like what I love about this story, I remember I heard about it growing up forever.
Right.
I remember that one time where a key word that they said, a phrase that they said, I mean, it shook me. And here they are. The king wants to throw them in the furnace because they refuse to bow down.
Yeah.
Like, all they have to do is, when they open that door, the furnace was so hot, whoever was standing by them, dead,
Cooked. Yeah.
done,
Uh-huh.
like grilled. And here you have them say, our God will save us. But even if he doesn't, we will never bow down. Like, there was, like, our faith, often, if we're not careful, it stops right before the but. Our God can save us. I don't want to receive no but if he doesn't.
Love it.
The fact that they said, but even if he doesn't,
That's good.
we won't bow down. Like, their faith was not contingent on the result being what they had hoped it to be. Their faith was in him. And their faith was so deep in him that they were like, even if he chose not to save us, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
We won't still bow down. That rocked me, and it rocked my faith, because I was like, do I have faith like that? I want to have faith like that.
I would love to hear, and I'm going to answer, and not that, I'm going to share my life in the sense that I felt like I was in that scenario, and I would love to hear if you have one. But I think me, growing up in ministry, doing the right thing, getting married, have a wonderful wife, wonderful child. At that point, it was just Penelope. Things going so well. I felt like at that point, I didn't realize that I was in my heart feeling like I deserved it. I did everything right, and this is what I got. How fragile that thought was when my son was born, and I don't mean to keep bringing that up, but when Lucas was born, that same value I found in deserving it, I now felt like, what did I do wrong? Right? Did I pray enough? Did I not have faith? I start looking back to see, like, what did I do wrong for something like this to happen, which had nothing to do with it, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think I got to that certain point where my faith lasted up to the point where things were perfect. Not realizing that my faith was kicking in, and God was really cultivating my faith at the point when things were not.
Yeah.
So I found my faith in brokenness rather than I did in when things were perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm like you. I feel like I'm a broken record. There's two real big seasons of mine that my faith was really shaken, and it both kind of dealt with me following the direction of the Lord. Like, one time it was a church plant. We did a church plant, and it was funny because I always grew up hearing the word potential. You got so much potential. You got so much potential,
Yeah.
I remember going through training, and when we were in that training course, like, my wife and I, Marilyn and I, we stood out in that class, and everyone was like, when we were doing group projects, and it was all about starting a church, like folks be over your shoulder looking, oh, wow, that's cool, that's cool. I remember the guy who ran the whole project literally met us. Like, he came out of his way to meet us, took a picture with us, and was like, bro, we're so excited about what you guys are going to do. So, we're like, man, people see this. God
you're
is in
amped
this.
up, like
We did it. We did the church plant. We stood out. I mean, the music, worship was on point. I felt like the messages was on point. What we were doing was like so raw in a sense. And we did 2 years. I felt like we were hitting the wall. We had to meet out of another church, and then we had to meet out of another church while they were meeting. That killed our momentum. I felt like we went from being in this huge building. God was just doing things. We're in a smaller room in this larger building. Man, this is kind of embarrassing. And I remember Marilyn she was getting tired, and I was getting frustrated at times. And I remember I sought out counsel from a pastor that I respected, and he said, man, I just feel like God wants you to know that he is pleased with what you have done, well done, and that he is releasing you. So I made the decision to step down, to close the doors. And that was in 2013. 2013 is when we start. 2015 in October, we just finished our 2 year. It was in October where we closed the door. And I look back still, every March 13th of every year, it's almost like I'm mourning a child I lost.
Wow.
Because I have no idea why it didn't work.
Wow.
And I couldn't help, still to this day at times, but I'm in a way better place. It was I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough to make this thing grow. I wasn't good enough to get our own building. I wasn't good enough to get that momentum. So every year, it just passed not too long ago, I'm like the only one that, I feel like I'm the only one that thinks about it. So clearly it's forgettable.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I felt like I lost a child. But I also find peace in, this is what faith is about.
Right.
I don't have to understand it all. My faith needs to be willing to do whatever you say, God. And I might not understand the full picture to this. I might not see the end. Like most of the people in the Faith Hall of Fame chapter, most of them did not see the end, the promise. But it's still something that sits with me where I'm like, I don't understand why. It was so good. And I'm not biased. I'm not that guy who's like, I think I sound good, and I'm like, yo, I suck. Like, I feel like I'm honest.
Yeah.
If something sucks, it sucks, and I'll say it, bro. I was terrible today.
And I don't want to interrupt you,
No.
but I think what I appreciate about you, and in some ways I felt like brought so much life to me recently, is to witness you, number one, being a father, being a husband, being a pastor here at the church, and working in so much humility. I think is seeing you do it with a sense of realness. And I think, and I would assume, like a lot of that comes from the fact that you have lost it. And not that you're working out, working this ministry out because you lost something and you need to fulfill yourself. But you're doing it because you know what it is to be here, and you know what it is to be here. And the fact that you could take a guy like me, in a sense where, and for a while I've just kind of been blindfolded, you take my hand and just say, hey, feel this, try this, do this.
Yeah.
And I think that in itself, and I'm being super genuine right now, in the last month or so has been an absolute blessing that someone could take time, and it's only because of your experience, because you've been in the highs and lows, that I think you could kind of guide me through the process that's so blurry to me right now.
Yeah. Man, I appreciate you saying that. I think, and people say like authenticity, we're all about authenticity. Right. I realize about me, like, I do seek authenticity. And what I mean by that is, like, if I won't say something that doesn't need to be said that I don't really mean. Like, for me to say, bro, I'm so excited that we get to do this, and I'm not, I just won't say it. I'll figure out what the right feeling that's going on in me to say it. When I look at you, like, and we spoke, even when we're at your house, like, I see so much potential in you, like so much potential that I just want to witness. I want to witness it more. So even in the small steps that you took when you were in, like, this morning at service,
right?
I feel like that's just the start. is just to start. And I know how difficult sometimes it was for me to move forward and see myself in a space when it was hard for me to see myself there. But that's why I couldn't wait to have you on, because I felt like, man, I know what's inside this guy. Like, I can just see it. And it's not like we went to the same college, but it's not like we hung out. We didn't hang out. I just knew you were my brother-in-law's roommate.
Yeah.
But even then, there was something about you that stood out to me. And for me, I don't always say it, but I think about it. When it comes to a good leader, the two things that attract me to any good leader is humility and strength. Like, they don't gotta flex. There's a strength.
Okay, I was going to ask, what do you mean by strength? But gotcha.
Yeah, like there's a strength that they have, that they'll do what needs to be done.
Yeah.
That they'll say what needs to be said, but they don't do it in a way that they got to bring attention and say, I don't care what nobody thinks. No. And they're rude.
They're secure.
No, there's a silent strength to them that is seen when it needs to be. There's no need to flex.
Yeah.
There's no insecurity. And I feel like you have that. There's a humility to you, and there's a strength to you. And so that's why I was like, bro, it would be dope to not only just have you today, but like reoccurring, where it's like, let's just have these conversations and let's see how this can bless someone else.
Yeah, and I love that we can have these conversations. And even in the context that we were here just a few hours ago, and, I take no, I try not to put so much weight in things like that, but what's happening on the background of it all, I think where I see God's hand in him using you, using the church, using Pastor John and even Ashley, just to set reminders that, yes, from the beginning of time, you have been called for a purpose. Yeah. I think allows us to just get back online and align our identity to Christ again. Yeah. Even if it is something small like announcements, I don't plant my 2 feet on whether I'm doing announcements or not. Yeah. But the fact that it reminds me that we are communicating something that moves the kingdom, I think realigns us again. Yeah. It finds our identity back to where God wants it to be.
Yeah. And again, and not to beat this dead horse, like even your family, like I feel like there's just a gifting upon all of y'all. Even your daughter, she's super young, but you can just see based on her personality, like what kind of woman she can be. The tenderness of Lucas and just his ability to make people smile and create this warmth. Like, you guys can, it's like a power team in a sense, and and we don't do it for that attention, just like we don't seek out ministry to try to validate who we are.
Well said.
But we definitely, we're human, and we've gone through and learned, especially me, learned the hard way not to allow those things to give me my self-worth. Because then when you lose that self-worth, you go to man to try to get them to build you back up, and that is dangerous too.
Yes, and the way I try to look at it, at least now, this is all coming to me now, not necessarily how I've been looking at it, but it's like getting something in Christmas from under the tree, unwrapping it, and then leaving it there so we could pass by and see it every day. Like, wow, that was a great gift. Yeah. But never really utilizing it. Yeah. And I think where I am now in life and in the conversations I'm having with my wife is, all right, let's pick it up again. Let's figure out, let's get the manual again. Let's try to figure out how we use this again, because the talents are there. She could sing. She's amazing. She's graceful. Like, she's an amazing woman, but ultimately, I think there's a gift inside of us beyond what you see that God uses us to impact and disciple people. Yeah. And I think that's the tool and the gift that I think that I look forward to using again. Yeah. Hope that makes sense.
Also, it makes so much sense. So, growing up in the 90s, I say growing up in the 90s. I was born in 81. What year were you born
85.
in? 85. Yeah. So, I can say growing up in the 80s, but I was so young, like I don't remember a lot. Right. I do remember more the 90s. So, growing up in the 90s, there was this phrase that was so influential that I felt like it inspired generations. Like, it became a staple in the lives of many. Now, I couldn't really pinpoint its origin, because there were certain things online that made it seem like it was in the 60s. Others made it seem like it was introduced in the 70s. They kind of waited on what was the most popular and what really catapulted this phrase. But again, needless to say, it marked generations. And me growing up in the 90s, it was 3 words. I don't know if you can even think of what that catchphrase would be.
Suspense is killing me though.
It was keep it real. Keep it real. And then we went to this, it was personal, where I'm keeping it real. And so we used it in a way where it took on many different uses. And one of them being a form of resistance. So you tell someone, yo, keep it real. It's almost like don't just go with the flow of things. Don't conform. You need to keep it real. Others, it was about the experiencing certain things. So it was about, you got to keep it real. Don't miss out on this. Other uses were more about inventing that experience. Yo, keep it real. Be real to yourself and be the first, the catalyst to actually do this. And so that thing, I remember hearing it, and I remember like that became something I processed everything to. Am I keeping it real?
Yeah.
You know, are they keeping it real?
Okay.
You know, and so we started just looking through it in so many different ways. It was funny because I looked up online and it says this. It says, in the present day, keeping it real has retained its flavor of resistance, but without any connection to cultural authenticity. It has been drained of any real power for change. Ultimately, it may still have the potential for resistance through sharing authentic personal experience. But as its history suggests, that potential easily co-opted by performers motivated by the profit that realness can generate without recognizing its roots in cultural authenticity. I remember reading that and I was like, man, that is exhausting.
Definitely.
3 words that should have been so simple. Keep it real.
Crazy.
You see how many uses it takes on and how many variations that it takes on, something that should have just been understood by us all.
Right.
Each people group gravitated to it and translated it in a way that made sense for them.
Yeah.
So not to say that keeping it real is so simple, because we understand in essence what the message was that they were attempting to communicate. But I felt like from just observing it, it should have been pretty straightforward what we were trying to communicate. But we're all in this pursuit of discovering who we are. Like everybody wants to know who they are in life. And so this one phrase was an attempt at authenticity.
I see where you're going. Yeah.
Like I'm just keeping it real. None of us want to be a photocopy of this, or we don't want to be an imitator of that. We all want to be unique. We want to be original. We want to be authentic, and that's kind of where we all lean to. But we can't talk about keeping it real. We can't really celebrate that without keeping it Christ. My thought has always been, you can't keep it real if you ain't keeping it Christ. I know that sounds like cheesy Christianity from back in the day, but how can you be real when you don't go to your creator that made you to walk you through how realness really looks for you?
Right.
Like you can see realness from someone else and be so inspired by that you want to emulate that.
Yeah.
But if that's not how he wired you and gifted you and called you, that's not the path he's telling you to go. In your attempt to be real, you're just emulating someone else. Yeah. And you're not keeping it real no more, even though you feel, I'm just keeping it real.
Yeah.
It's like,
the only thing, and I thought that was a great assessment of that, and I that's amazing what you said. But the problem with it is that when we pursue Christ, or when Christ pursues us, and we find him, our reality changes. So what keeping it real is that I grew up with trauma and I'm passing my trauma out. That I grew up with, I grew up in the streets and, I'm keeping it real because this is where I grew up. We see that all the time. There's a lot of realness that's wrong, and that's the problem. So I think when we when we now have a relationship with God, there's a complete pivot in life that although I should be this, now that I found Christ, there's a complete change in me. And now I'm keeping it real. Because I think in the keep it real in the context that we should have now is that keep it authentic.
Yeah.
Right? We have to be authentic to what Christ did with us. That's also hard, though.
Yeah.
That's also hard that we can have a group of guys and talk about our struggles. When I think our natural instinct is to protect our reputation, don't show that we're weak or don't show that we have a weakness.
Yeah.
Quickly, I will never forget that, growing up, like many other men, I grew up, with lust and although the outside was good, I was filthy inside. I came to a certain place that got engaged, got married, everything was fine. And I had a friend who I would always, like an accountability partner, right? He lived in Miami. And we would always talk about, our struggles and what's going on. And, what I thought was marriage, suddenly, that's the cutoff, right? That's when I pivot. Everything changes. Doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So then everything was fine and everything was great. And then he told me, hey, listen, by the way, I feel from God to tell you that at some point you're going to have to share this with your wife. And what I've shared with my wife to that point was a spotless past. Nothing ever happened,
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, sure. God bless you. All right. Have a good one. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. That ain't happening.
I remember I went to bed that night and kicking off a conversation with no intention with my wife, just great conversation. And she started asking me probing questions about my past. And I'm like, let's stop this conversation. Like, no, I don't want to have this conversation. But what happened there, from up until that point, I wasn't keeping it real. I wasn't being authentic with my wife. She knew me. I'm not saying she didn't know me.
Yeah.
She knew me. But there's more to me in what God was doing in my life. And I wasn't sharing that part of my testimony with her. So as those questions came up, man, I fought until the end.
Yeah.
And I just felt like this weight where I was able to share my testimony with her. We cried together. We prayed together. And our relationship has never been the same after that. But I think authenticity allowed it, that I was able to finally show her not who I am from here on the outside, but where God took me from, where I can easily have just hidden forever, and I think that was, there was a blessing in being authentic.
Yeah. Like, think about it. You and I, we can never be who he's created us to be unless we're honest with him and honest with ourselves. Like, it starts there. Think about how many people, and I've been there, you make plans for your future from a place of uncertainty. Like, I'm going to be this. This is my career goal. This is my plans with my life. This is what I'm going to do with my life. And I'm still figuring out who I am in the Lord. Like, that is so risky to put that many ducks in a row only for you to hit a place and you're like, yo, this isn't me at all. Like, so I don't know for you, I don't know if you've ever been in a scenario where you went all in for something only to come back and realize this isn't who I am. Now I got to pivot and go in a total different direction now.
Yeah. Absolutely. Answers yes. I've been in that situation. And I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I found myself, regardless if I'm doing ministry or I'm not, I'm going hard. Always. I'm going in this direction, even if it's in the wrong direction. That's kind of like the habits I've been doing, right? If it's work, I'm going all in. I'm going to be the best manager out there. I'm going to be the best father. I'm going to be the best husband. So I don't know if you have like those little vacuums, that you just press a button and it just kind of
goes
like,
on its own?
It doesn't. You leave and it's still vacuuming. If it hits a bump or the sensor hits, it just goes in another direction. If it hits, then it goes in another direction. I think I feel like that in the sense that regardless if ministry was it, but I don't find an open door, I'm going in another direction. I kind of found myself getting lost in my career because of the closed doors that God was just trying to teach me through. I didn't allow that to stop me. And sometimes I think that's where I didn't allow God to just like, wait, let me ponder what God is up to.
Yeah.
Instead of pondering and meditating on it, I think I put my time on things that I found my identity in, and ultimately I came out empty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I came with nothing.
Yeah. I remember I was in high school and I put two and two together. I like graphics, I like drawing, I like arts. And at that time in my high school, I could do bivocational. So I can go to a college campus half of my day, start getting college credits while I was in school.
Right.
And I'm like, dope. So I did computer graphics. I remember I put a full year in that. They were coming back and they basically wanted to re-enroll everyone. So one at a time, you going into the teacher's office. And so I just want to make sure you're in this and that. It was so weird. I encountered the Lord like never before. It was clear as day that he told me if I did anything other than what he called me to do, that I would never feel complete. Never. That was the moment I knew ministry, full-time ministry, was where my heart was at.
Wow.
So I remember going to the office, and I told her, like, I was young too, so you giving way too much information. No, I really feel like God called me to do this and that. She was like, okay, you could have just said no, you know? But I remember at that moment, like, was it a year wasted? I mean, I got to get out of school. It didn't hurt me. I was younger at the time.
Yeah.
But I think about how many times we set out based on who we feel we are today. We haven't truly surrendered our lives to the Lord. We're not really walking in faith. We're walking in faith in the sense of when it comes to belief and religion, but not truly faith when it comes to wholeheartedly following the direction of Him. I think of how many times how many years people lose only for them to realize I'm miserable. I don't find no fulfillment in this. This is not who I'm meant to be, and now you backtrack. All simply because you pursued a way that seemed right to you at that time rather than really disciplining yourself to put it before the Lord.
Yeah.
And even know how and what that means for you to put it before the Lord and say, God, are you in this?
Yeah.
Like, is this what you're calling me to do? Again, our faith in Him, it unveils our identity. As I pursue Him, as I'm walking with Him, as I'm reading His Word, His Spirit is communicating to me. I'm like, man, this thing makes sense. This thing is hitting like it's never hit before.
Right.
This passage is like, I'm understanding all of this.
Whoa.
Like, wow. Simply because I took that step of faith, trusting He is the way.
Yeah.
And now He's revealing desires that I have. I'm getting excited about this. I'm getting passionate about this. I'm getting teary-eyed by this. I'm being moved by this. I'm being convicted by that. All starts with that first step of saying, God, I'm not gonna just give myself too much credit. I'm gonna trust you. Though I know what I might want to do, what are you asking of me? Where are you wanting me to go? How are you wanting me to move? How are you wanting me to pivot? And that all starts with our faith in Him. Like, so I've just come to grow and learn, man, if we're not careful, it's kind of like what you said. If we don't allow Him to own us, something else is going to take that place.
Definitely.
Something else.
Just like Ashley said today, like, we're created to worship something, you know?
Yeah.
We're created to worship something.
And people hate that image. And there's a little resistance in me, you know, when you think about it. But when you look at the heart of what worship is, it is you literally surrendering everything to get that.
Be owned.
Yeah.
Be owned.
That thing owns you. And you're like, no, I paid for that with my money.
It's just surrendering it. It's
That thing has your
surrendering
heart.
to it completely.
Yeah.
Whatever has your heart, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even in the question that we're asking, like, who are you? I can't answer that question looking forward. I have to answer that question with, like, what does my time have?
Yeah.
You know, well, where am I putting my money? Where am I putting my resources and my energy? That's what owns me, you know? So I got to be able to look back and say, wow, my life reflects being a child of God. My life reflects being loved by God.
Yeah.
And being a new creation.
Yeah.
Those are our identity.
Yeah.
But if you look back, like, are we living that way? And I think there's enough grace out there that God picks us up, dusts us off, and kind of redirects us. But ultimately, I think our identity is found, and we can kind of get a glimpse of it by looking back.
Yeah.
Looking back and say, all right, what owns you? What are you worshiping?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I feel like the more we conform to the goals of this world, the dreams, the methods of this world, the further from God we get, the further from the truth we get, the further from our true selves we get. Like the Bible makes it clear that we are not to conform to this world, but we have to be transformed. We have to change the way we think by his word. So it's a very dangerous place when my level of success is tangible and it's the world's level of success.
Yeah.
KB once said in one of his songs that success is not a number, but it's faithful labor.
Ooh.
And I'm like, I remember hearing that and it was like, it hit me. We look at success as how many people came out, how many folks are listening to your podcast, how many followers do you have, what's your bank account looking like, how many rides you got, what's your house looking like, you know, your clothes, and all that stuff, your kids, where are they going to college, what are they doing with their lives, so many things that can become so consuming and heavy.
Yeah.
And he's saying, man, success is being faithful.
Yeah.
And that thing rocked me when I heard it.
Man, you know, but all those things are filling something that you need.
Yeah.
That only God can fulfill. So I gave this example in a sermon I preached like 2 years ago, where Lucas, lacking ability in certain aspects, he looks different, he walks different, he's not going to be able to use his hand like everybody else. I could ultimately take a few different approaches with him. I can give him everything, making sure he feels comfortable, make sure he feels good and cool, and his friends think he's cool. I could take that approach. I could take the approach of making sure that he knows he's no different than anybody. He's like everyone else. But what I'm teaching him is, number one, find your identity in the things that you have and what people think about you.
Yeah.
You know, and to conform instead of, no, you are different. And ultimately, it's because you have a perfect creator who created you for a perfect purpose. So if I'm teaching him all these things, I think it falls into the same categories I felt in, and the sin that I fell in of what could I store up for myself? What could I store up for my family, my kids? It's all great intentions.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it veers you off from the fulfillment you're supposed to find in Christ, because ultimately none of that created you.
Yeah.
None of that. The money, the titles, the ambitions in your investments, none of that created you. Therefore you'll never find fulfillment in those things. You know, you're only going to find it on the very thing that created you. And I think that's what ultimately we are being distracted from.
Yeah. Yeah. I look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 to 27, and God is saying, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. Sometimes I'm learning, there's just certain speakers that constantly remind me to slow up. Like I'm reading a new book and the author is constantly saying, hey, ponder about this moment right now. I know you want to just get through this
Slow
book.
down.
Stop and meditate. And I kid you not, sometimes it annoys me. I'm like, dude, I ain't got no time. You know how slow I read? I'm like, I got to keep reading. And you want me to stop and just think on this. And it was challenging. But think about this. For God to say, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. That here you have God, the creator of the entire world, who can do anything, who spoke all things to existence, who was and was in existence before anything existed. It was just God. I don't understand how that's even, that he's saying, let's make them to be just like us. And think of what I'm settling, how I'm settling to try to be like them. When God said, I made you to be like me, to be like us. If I don't slow down and take that in and ask God, man, if you made me like you, what does that mean? What does that look like? And I'm throwing away something that is priceless for something cheap and easy by me trying to attain this, reach this status. And God is saying, man, I made you. I made you to be like me. He goes on to say, just saying again, he created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created a male and female. He created them. Like we were made to be like him. So in a practical sense, the best way that I could really become like him is by spending time with him. Like anything else.
Right.
If you want to be like somebody, you got to be around them. You following the way their mannerism, their dialogue, how they communicating with other people, how they interact. And I'm taking it in. So we have his word and we get to be in his presence, and we just have to condition ourselves and discipline ourselves that even when we're in his word, to slow down.
Yeah.
We want to just know that we read the entire Bible in a year, and it's doable.
Check.
Yeah, it's a check. But what about just meditating on his word? Do you have enough time to spend your time, instead of going through everything, to give you more progress? Can you just meditate on this one verse and allow God's Spirit to minister to you on that?
Yeah.
If I just focused on Genesis 1:26 and asked God, Holy Spirit, help me understand. When you said that you're making me to be in your image, to be like you, help me to understand. Give me sight to see what that means, and where am I at? How far off am I? Help bring me back. Help bring me back to aim to live a life where I'm actually in line with your original design, and that is to be like you.
Oh, man.
So even in our reading, if we're not careful, we take on the hustle and grind mentality in our relationship with the Lord, and we miss it.
Yeah.
We miss it because we just want to check and be like, oh yeah, 45 minutes I spent time with the Lord today.
The very idea of just our relationship with God and salvation and how he brought us to himself, and that idea is quite simple, right? That idea is quite simple, that he loved us so much that he sent his son to die for us. It's a beautiful truth. I'm not kind of like watering that down. It's a beautiful truth. But ultimately, if we think as deep as how he created us, how we are all so uniquely different, how our brains are wired, our trauma has made us, and like so much that we bring that makes us unique, and to think that he knows exactly who we are, and he knows our name, and he knows how he's going to use us and for the purpose he's going to use us for. I think that's where we underestimate how complex that idea is. That you and I, although very similar, are completely different people, but God deals with us in our level and who we are and how we're wired, you know? And I think just the idea of how much he's loved us, that he's lavished his love, he lavished his love on us so much so that he calls us the children of God. Like that very idea that he calls us uniquely his, I think is really, really deep and only can be really understood, at least by a small measure, if we ponder on that and we slow down and we just think about it a little deeper than just saying, wow, this is a great verse to take me through the day. You know?
Who do you take after in your family?
My dad.
Your dad.
My dad, absolutely. My dad is a preacher and a construction where he does a lot of building. My brother grew up to be the building, and I grew up to be the preacher. So he made a little bit of both of us, you know. Although my brother's a killer discipler, he's amazing. But yeah, my dad, he's a very gentle man. That when he speaks, everybody listens. And he's just one of those guys that you won't remember him with a microphone, but he has impacted every single person in that church that he's around. He's just that type of person. When he's eating lunch at work, he's retired now. My brother used to work with him. He used to be eating lunch at work, and every day was someone different sitting in front of him, and him just speaking life into them and speaking and preaching the gospel to them. He's just that type of person. Yeah,
that's awesome. And the reason I asked that is because, like, we'll all naturally take after someone,
right?
And so we're able to grasp that. We're able to grasp that and understand how that works.
Right.
How much more so is God wanting us to take up after Him? Like you're like your father because he was there.
Right.
It's not just in the blood and in the genes. It was you were around him day in and day out. He modeled so many things, and he basically kind of shaped and formed convictions of yours, views of yours, work ethics, and now you are who you are simply because of your relationship with your father. It's no different when our relationship with the Lord. The difference is, have we committed the time to be around him, to learn what he's like, to learn his mannerism. That the same way I said, who do you take after? I mean, instantly, there was no thought. Boom, you're smiling. You probably envision something
Right.
about your pops at that exact moment,
yeah.
how you guys similar certain things and favor certain things. And I'm like, God wants that with us. He made us in his image. Your father is made in the image of God, so you therefore are carrying certain attributes of God that you got to see modeled through your father.
Yes.
And that's powerful that God allows people like that to play that mark. That he knows the relationship that would be for you and the impact that it would have for him, his nature being in your father to be then poured out into you.
Yes.
And then in turn you with your kids and so forth. It's a domino effect. I think how sad it is when we strive so hard at our lives only to realize, man, I missed it. I'm so tired, so exhausted. My cup is not full. I can say I have all these things, but the things that really matter, when a person is on their dying bed, they don't want the money. They don't want the stuff. They want more time with the people. My prayer is just like, Lord, help me to always be sensitive to you, to not get caught up in the rat race, to not get caught up in what I think I need to be happy. You're sufficient. All I need is in you. And my faith helps to bring that clarity back and say, I don't need this. It's okay if I don't have that.
Right.
All I need is him. Like, I'm most alive. We're most alive when we are, one, abiding in the Father, connecting with him, and when we know that we are being who he's called us to be. You will feel most alive when you're walking in your element with the Father. Because it's a sense of obedience. There's a sense of, you're pleasing the Father because you're trusting him enough with his blueprint that you're living it out. And you're reaping fruit simply by you trusting and obeying him. And there's no greater feeling for a parent than to watch their child trust them, take their advice, and now they're reaping the fruit to instructions that they were given, and they see the benefit for themselves.
Yeah, and I think that could happen in the context of ministry. It could happen in the workplace. It could happen to you as a school teacher or you as a mom or dad. I think it's just always having in light that the gospel drives us. I think at work, the way it drives me is that, I can't necessarily just go out there and preach the gospel, right? And I've had managers that have, and they're fine, but, I can't necessarily do that. But the way I view people, instead of just Xing them out and saying, this is not going to work, you got to go, I extend a little grace, because grace has been extended to me, or if someone is really in that grind and they're not finding fulfillment in it, I said, you're missing something, and I will tell them, you need Jesus just like he filled me. So I think in our work, it's just making sure it's not just work, but it's a context that God, or at least a platform that God gave us to share God's love not only through our actions, but our words as well. And just making sure that these are opportunities that God put us in, that work is an honorable thing and it's redeemed. That's something that we've always done even before the fall. But we are to do it in the sense that it's guided by God and it's done for a purpose, and it shouldn't be taking 40, 50, 60 hours out of your week and not having any sort of kingdom impact,
Yeah, I like that. When you're able to just see that, like you see the purpose in being a good steward with whatever God has given you.
Right.
And that your platform, whatever it be, that becomes your mission field. Like, I can bring God into any environment. And just like a missionary has to be strategic how and when, it's no different with us. Like, I have to know, I have to be sensitive to the Spirit. I have to be sensitive to where this individual's at. I have to be sensitive to the fact that we're working and you're getting paid to do something, so I can't keep sitting you down in my office and you're not doing work. Like,
Right.
everything plays a part.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how am I being faithful with just the field that God has brought me into with the people that he's calling me? And again, all that identity, all that purpose comes from just a relationship with the Lord. As I spend time with him, as I walk with him, as I'm in his word, he's revealing his nature to me. He's convicted me of certain things. He's showing me other things. I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm changing, I'm pivoting, I'm becoming more like him.
Yeah.
And then again, that all started with that first step of saying, I believe you are who you said you are. You're Jesus Christ. There is no way to the Father but through you. It all started with that first step of faith when I chose to surrender my life to the Lord.
Yeah.
From that becomes a relationship that I now grow in by faith, trusting he's there, and he's starting to show me more and more. He's revealing desires. He's revealing purposes. And his purpose and his plan for us is perfect.
Yeah.
It's like down to the wire.
Yes.
That becomes revealed to us through our relationship with the Lord. Like, so in reality, our identity in Christ is based in what he's done for us. And even in that, we put this weight that I gotta be. And he's like, your identity in me is found in what I've done for you.
All right, that's
you
next
don't even
episode,
have
bro,
to.
because that's deep. Yeah. I love that.
Man.
I love that. That's totally reversed on how I would have answered what is my identity.
Yeah.
Because it's a reflection of what I've done.
Yep.
Like we already mentioned, the things that I do, I say, like I can articulate what my identity is, but I love how you're making me view on God's resume. You know, that's who I am.
Yeah.
Because I am now through Christ, you know, seated at the right hand of the Father. I'm because of Christ.
Because of what he's done.
So I absolutely love that idea. Yeah, that's
Like,
that truth.
We're that guy who comes in and it's like, yo, do you know who my father is?
Oh,
he
man.
made all this.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. So when I go through just a couple of lists, Genesis 1:27 tells us that we were made in his image. This becomes my identity. I'm made in his image to be like him. John 1:12, you are a child of God.
Yeah.
So I realized I'm a child of God because of what he's done, because of his sacrifice. I get to be his child. Romans 10:13, that you are saved. John 15:16, that you are chosen. Romans 15:7, that you are accepted. 2 Corinthians 5:17, that you are a new person. Notice all these things are things that he's done and postures that we're able to take on, and it has nothing to do with what you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
It's not your teacher, your preacher, your prophet, and those things have its place. But these identity things are things that won't shift, that won't change. Colossians 2:10, you are complete in Christ. Ephesians 3:18 and 19, that you are loved. So when our faith is rooted in him, we make room for his word to transform us, which ultimately then frees us from this weight that we feel that I have to be this, I have to perform this, in order to feel validated, in order to feel important, in order to feel successful, I have to do all these things. And then in Galatians 4:7, it says that you are free. You are free. So all these things I'm able to allow, these truths allowed to take place in my heart, to resonate, to free me so that I can be who he's called me to be. And it has nothing to do about doing yet.
Yeah.
It's all about when you come to a place to where you be. I'm going to be first. Out of me just being, the natural byproduct is me doing. I'm going to do from a place of where I'm at. And where I'm at is because of the room that he made for me. And now it's like the weight doesn't fall on me.
No.
I get to be free now and not feel like I'm going to let anyone down.
That's
it's like,
amazing. Yeah, because the reality is that I was a sinner,
Yep.
but the new reality is that I'm
Yeah.
holy.
Yeah.
The reality is that I'm broken, now I'm complete.
Yeah.
I was lost, now I'm found. Like this very split between the but God, right? Like that moment where we encounter God, he completely changes the definition of keeping it real.
Yeah.
You know, he changes that definition in us.
Yeah. Yeah.
That we can embody and live the truth of his works,
Yeah.
not ours.
Yeah. Yeah,
That
because we
could
think,
oh my gosh.
I think we like this idea of, I did this. And then the weight
100%.
is so overwhelming where it's like, I don't want this responsibility no more.
Yeah.
So when you come to a place to where you realize, I know you thought you needed this to feel validated, to feel important, you're going to realize that cross is way heavier than you think. Trust me.
Yeah.
I will use you. Like,
Yeah.
I'm looking at the Great Commission, Matthew 28, the Great Commission. Here's Jesus coming back. He resurrected, defeated death. And he said, I made you to do something on this earth. I have a purpose for you on this earth. I want you to go into all the world. Preach my word, make disciples. Teach them what I've taught you. This is what I want you to do. This is your assignment here, that you have found the truth, that you have found identity in me, that now I want you to then go and tell other people. Now that you're in a place to where you've discovered truth, and that truth has set you free. That's why this version of my truth is so dangerous. Your truth isn't going to set you free. Your truth is going to change because your viewpoint, your convictions might change. I don't want my truth. I want their truth because that truth sets me free. And now when I'm free, I can find my identity in him. And now he's saying, listen, I have a purpose for you.
Yeah.
I want you to go and I want you to tell everyone about me. And I'm going to give you power that I have. I'm going to give you that power through the Spirit to enable you to do things that you never could have done on your own. That all started with faith.
Oh man.
That step. Now I'm finding my identity in him.
Yeah.
And I'm free.
Yeah, because the truth doesn't change.
Yeah.
The truth remains. I mean, all the way from the beginning up until now, our context changed, church dynamic changed, religion changes, our family dynamics change. Like, there's so much in life that is so fragile and changes. I think we can stand on one truth.
Yeah.
And that's what I love, that where our faith stands on that truth, the one that never changes.
Yeah.
You know? And we can stand on that, and we're secure and we're good. And I think when we follow the ups and downs in life, in which, I've definitely felt for that. I think standing on the truth that I am his and I am his child, that although I am weak and although I have fallen and although, I'm struggling with certain temptations, I can stand. And I remember you mentioned that in the podcast. That was such a blessing. That was low-key my question. But just seeing that you answered that in the way that how we view ourselves after falling or after being in a certain, falling into temptation. I think the thing you mentioned that you have to be careful with is how you view yourself.
Yeah. Not allowing that thing to now be your identity.
Your identity.
It's like, no, my child could do something wrong because sin is in their nature.
Yeah.
And if they don't put that thing in its place, it will consume them.
Love it.
Because they do something wrong, does that mean that's who they are? Because one of them stole something, does that mean they're a thief now? Like, it's like we got to be careful. We want to give labels, and then we don't realize how those labels end up being crutches that we carry for so long.
Yeah.
Like, we got to make sure I know I messed up. But that's why, like, I don't do the sinner saved by grace thing.
Yeah.
I was a sinner. I accept that his gift was given to me, that it was sufficient, that I can't make sense of it. But now, because of what Christ did for me, when he sees me, he doesn't see me, he sees Christ. So you telling me that God sees his son as a sinner? Like, no, he sees me as his child.
Oh man.
That's,
and we were bought, we were purchased,
Yeah.
and he's the only one, even outside of ourselves, like, he's the only one that could label us.
Yeah.
And he did that.
yeah,
He did that.
yeah.
He did that.
Yeah, man. So I'm just convinced as we discover him, as we grow in him, as we allow him to reveal to us our identity, as he helps to shape us and rid certain things that are hindering us from being who he's called us to be, we then get to walk in a journey where we get to now do the things that he's called us to do. And there is something so special when you find yourself at work with him. The way you experience his presence, simply by you putting your hands to work the way he put his hands to work. There's such a closeness you experience by you doing the mission and being who he's called you to be. Like, It's like no other.
Yeah.
And faith is what unlocks that door for you to now walk in intimacy with the Father on mission, on purpose.
Yeah.
But you got to know who you are.
Yeah.
So that the enemy doesn't feed you with these lies of who you are. And it's like, bro, that's not who I am at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think something I struggle with, and I've mentioned this to you, is that I'm always waiting to be called to do something.
Yeah.
Whether announcements or whatever, a podcast, which by all means I'm here and I love it and it's amazing, but I'm waiting to be called. And I think it sounds cliche, but God called me.
Yep.
And if I'm secure that he called me to something, I think I have to stand up for that. And I have to be secure in the fact that he's going to use me for a purpose, regardless, stage, no stage, work, home. I have to stand up for what he called me to.
Yeah.
Not with no ounce of pride,
Yeah.
but direct being a servant to him who called me.
And I think when more of us live like that, it is so liberating for other people that are struggling with that.
Yes.
Because we all at some point in time will struggle with that thought, man. I remember getting to a place, and I'm still there, where I say things like, this person, that's not their responsibility to give me a place. God calls me. God opens doors. I don't wait for man to give me a place. Now, I don't say that in a conceited
Absolutely
place
not.
or I'm angry, but I'm like, do you understand how much I forfeit when I'm like, please give me an opportunity, versus realizing God is like, bro, there's so many opportunities you
It's
got.
the opposite.
Yeah.
The undertone of not stepping up to do what God told you to do is pride.
Yeah.
It's pride.
Yeah.
So you might think it's the opposite, but I think ultimately the waiting to be called, like if you're, no, I think that ultimately was the pride that the Lord was dealing with me on. And I think the humility is, no, I'm standing up. I got to do what God called me to do.
Yeah.
And that's actually the humble part,
Yeah.
of saying like, my pride is shot right now, but my turn. I got to do this,
Yeah. That's good.
With grace.
Yeah.
With grace. I'm not, all right, guys,
Grace and
No.
humility.
Yeah. But I think that was a great lesson that honestly, you sparked in me. Yeah.
Awesome. So on that note, we're going to close as we always do, and that is to encourage you to dream the dreams that God has placed inside of you, to live the life that he has called you to, and to love the way he loves you. Grace and peace.